So I know in Nashville is where you cross paths with Search.
Yes.
So tell us about that connection, how that came to pass.
I didn't really have a lot of background in faith stuff and wasn't really thinking about it. God really did use Search in a big way because I had a lot of questions and I was open. I had this crazy career. I was 18 years old. My first tour I was on, I opened for Rascal Flatts and Blake Shelton. I had, thankfully, a couple managers. They probably did the most important thing that anybody's ever done for me, which is they invited me into a Search group. I asked him if he could stay late, and I said, I got some questions for you, and here was my question. This week on the Reach Podcast.
All right, hey, welcome to the Reach Podcast. A little different setup today. Instead of Blaine being on this side of the conversation, my name is Josh Horton. I am on staff here with Search in Fort Worth, and I get the privilege of putting Blaine on the other side of this table and putting him in the hot seat. Blaine, excited to be here. Glad to get to interview you today. A little change of pace.
Well, I like it. I'm looking forward to getting grilled with all kinds of questions. So thanks for doing it.
I'm excited about it. I know you do a lot here with Search in your role as vice president and all the responsibilities you carry. I know you do a lot here for Reach and with this podcast. And so I kind of wanted just to take some time to hear more of your story. I have some questions I want to ask you, some places I want to try to dig into, but I'll just start with an open-ended kind of, do you mind sharing where are you from? What's the background of the Blaine Larsen, our podcast host?
I'll make it pretty quick. So, and again, thank you for being willing to step in today and do this. It's very nice of you. So I'm from a little small town called Buckley, Washington, which is just outside of Seattle. It's about an hour south of Seattle and about 30 minutes east of Tacoma. If you know Mount Rainier, that's up there, really, really pretty mountain. Buckley's right in the foothills of Mount Rainier. In fact, if you're going to drive up to the park and go, see all that stuff, it's just gorgeous. Buckley's one of the last towns you're going to go through. So we're up in the foothills of the mountains, and great place to grow up, small town, a couple thousand people. My parents were, married, and they ended up getting divorced when I was like 5 years old. Wow. And I remember that being pretty tough, and grew up, had a few years there where really my mom raised me and my little sister. Yeah. Got one little sister, one older sister. But me and my little sister, we were together with her, just the three of us, for a few years. And then she ended up getting remarried to the guy that really raised me the rest of my life and ended up adopting me later in life. I was about 15. So I had it was a little hard earlier, but when he came around and family life kind of stabilized, it was really a great childhood and very good upbringing, lots of good memories. Yeah. And one of the things that was different about it, though, at least from my perspective now, was we didn't have any kind of real faith background. And that's not even a criticism. It's just it wasn't part of our world growing up, and it wasn't part of the culture that I grew up in the Northwest for the most part. And so I really didn't think about a lot of the questions we talk about at Search or on this podcast till much later in life. So I ended up really getting interested in them. Probably I was about 19 or 20 years old, and I know we're covering a lot, but that's the very beginning stuff.
So a lot of people will probably find that surprising that you host this podcast and really wasn't a part of your life at all growing up. When you say that, do you mean like you go to church a couple times a year? Do you mean like no exposure, no interaction with that? No,
we didn't go to church.
Wow.
We didn't fake it. We weren't trying. I grew up, I knew I wasn't a Christian, all that. I mean, it was not part of our world at all.
And obviously, I think in that part of the country, that's probably more normal. But do you remember thinking about that as a kid, like wishing you'd go, or just part of your life?
Yeah. No, it was great. I mean, again, I'm not saying any of that as a criticism. It's just, but that's the way it was. I grew up that way. Yeah. And and I will tell you what, there's a lot of benefits in a certain way. You and I have very different challenges.
Yes, we do. That's another story for another day.
Yeah. So, but having grown up in the Northwest and then moved to Tennessee pretty young, and then now I'm in Texas, real different places, but Texas and Tennessee are cousins, as you know.
Yeah.
in a certain sense.
Certainly.
And so they're similar, but a lot more people down here grew up culturally Christian. And I guess I probably don't bring some sensitivities to stuff and some I don't know if it's just maybe baggage is too strong of a term, but there's a lot of stuff that I also didn't inherit that I think is pretty good. Yeah,
that'll be interesting as we get further down your story to see how that overlaps. Just going back to that pivotal season, you said at 15, adopted by your stepfather. What were you like at 15, 14, 15, 16? Those are pretty formative years in most people's lives.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, Blaine, around that stage of life?
I was a real dork.
Okay.
That's for sure.
Adds up.
Yeah, I was not one of the cool kids, but yeah, I got into music because of my dad who raised me. He wasn't musical at all, but loved listening to music. And so I was probably 10 years old when I thought I could sing like those guys on the radio. And he loved country music. And by the way, it's huge in Washington State.
That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, but I grew up country. I mean, again, I told you it's a couple thousand people, mountain town. Yeah. So, that was what we listened to. So my dad listened to that. And yeah, I got into music. So by the time I was like 14, 15 years old, I had already gotten connected to some people in Nashville. And by the way, we're like just a normal family. Yeah. So not rich. My dad worked at Boeing. My mom worked at the school that I went to. I mean, just regular people. So we didn't have connections to Nashville or anything like that. And
you said you started playing at like 10?
Started playing at like 10. Okay. By 14, I made my first trip to Nashville. And in 15, I got my first major label record deal with Sony Music out of Nashville. And so I'll tell you the quick version of that story because it's totally a God story looking back. But I wasn't trying to get into the music business at all. It wasn't a dream or a goal. In fact, I don't know if you remember being that young, but I don't remember even thinking I have to get a job someday.
Yeah.
At least I wasn't even thinking about it. I just play music for fun. So this is a long time ago, so like late 90s. I remember I got one of the first CD burners, and I had karaoke tapes that I bought, and a little crude, it was a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder that would do multi-track recording on a cassette. I mean, yeah, it's so archaic now. But I'd do little demos of me singing karaoke and record them with this thing, and I'd burn them, and then I'd have my buddies make copies for me, like burn more copies, I'd burn like 100 of them, and I'd sell them at school. We had a pretty big high school. And so I did okay doing that, and so all these little CDs started floating around, and one of the girls that went to my high school... This is
around 13, 14 that you're doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so one of the girls went to my high school, who I didn't even know, but she bought one of these, liked it, and she was related distantly, but like third cousins, with a guy who was a big songwriter, and like a legit hit songwriter, and in fact still is in the music business, doing really well. A guy some of y'all may even know or have heard of, but he ended up getting that because she sent it to him and said, "This kid goes to my high school, and I think he might be pretty good." And that's how I got to Nashville. And her name was Kelly Carnahan. She's still around. And she got married, actually, so I don't know what her last name is. But, it's just the most random thing, but that's how I got connected. So my point is my teenage years took a real different turn from most people's.
Yeah, that would not be the standard high school years. So
no.
What did you love the music part? Did you like the fact that you were good at it and got some attention? Like what drew you more and more into that?
Well, yeah, I did.
Or did it just kind of happen? She sent away the demo.
It definitely just happened. So I wasn't trying to make it happen. And once I got a record deal, though, I was smart enough, even at 15. By the way, total side note, I think it's definitely real. You don't, like, your brain is not working until you're in your mid-20s.
For sure.
I made a lot of big decisions before that, by the way. But yeah, I thought I better take advantage of this because I wasn't trying, and I know a lot of people work, a long time and never get an opportunity. So so once I got that, I said I'm gonna just go all in. I'd be kind of stupid not to.
Yeah,
so I did.
And so going all in around 15, does that mean you moved to Nashville then? What did that look like?
We didn't move. I really wanted to go to school with my friends.
Yeah.
I'd gone to school with my same class since kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to graduate with him. So I did that. And I was able to commute. So there's a whole bunch to this story. We can get bogged down at places I don't want to. But that record deal didn't last very long.
Yeah.
So I signed with Sony. And then the way the music business works is still this way, I think. I hear it is anyway.
Yeah.
I've been out of it for a long time. Yeah. But people are turning over all the time. So the
Yeah.
executives, companies are merging, they're buying each other out, all that kind of stuff. So I get signed by one group of executives at Sony, and then immediately, I'm talking like a month later, they are fired and new people are brought in, new executives and all that. And since I wasn't their person, the new guy, we had a meeting, he goes, look, think you're good, but I didn't sign you, I got my own people, and we think you might have something here, but I just want you, I'm totally shooting straight with you. I'm not going to do anything with you till you're 18.
Gotcha.
So happy if you want to stay on the roster and wait a few years and just develop and grow and all that, but we're not going to do anything with you till then. And so but he said, I'll also give you the option to just leave if you don't just want to sit around and wait for a few years, which I would understand. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So we left and asked out of that deal, and they let me out, which was very nice and rare. And then took a couple years, made a record independently. So I traveled back and forth to Nashville and quite a bit.
Yeah.
Made an indie record, released it up in the Northwest, and it did really well. Yeah. In fact, it was at the time we released it, it was the number one selling record in that region. And that's how I got the attention of Sony the second time. Was they're looking at the chart numbers, who is this guy? And it's all new people again. And so then they ended up, when I was 17, they ended up buying that record, and then we released it as my first major label release nationwide when I was like 18. And so that's the record that's called Off to Join the World.
Gotcha. And around that time, is that when you officially moved to Nashville, or how did that actually happen?
So moved to Nashville after I got married.
Okay.
So I met my wife, Sammy, in high school. We grew up together in the same little town. And so
high school sweethearts? Did y'all date back then, or?
Well, she's a little older than me. So I always say she was mine, but I wasn't hers.
Okay.
Yeah, which maybe I should have wrote that into a song.
It sounds like a good song, yeah.
So, so we got married right after I got out of high school. So she was in college, I was in high school, and we got married and then moved when I was 20 to Nashville, because Seattle is not very centrally located.
Yeah.
And by that time I was touring. And so it was like, every weekend, Thursday to Sunday. And I was flying back to Seattle every week, back and forth to Nashville.
Newly married.
Yeah. I saw her, no joke, I saw her for 24 to 36 hours a week. And so we moved after that.
Wow. Okay. So I know in Nashville is where you crossed paths with Search.
Yes.
So tell us about that connection, how that came to pass.
So, back to, I didn't really have a lot of background in faith stuff and wasn't really thinking about it. My wife, though, and this is when we were dating, but before we were married, she had become a Christian right before we started dating, and her background's real similar to mine. And so I really would say she was instrumental, very instrumental. And there were a couple of churches that we were a part of even back then before I moved. That was my first time stepping foot in a church.
Wow.
And so that was an interesting experience, a good one, interesting in a good way, like totally different than my perception or misconception probably would have been. So that was really helpful. Yeah. And so there's a lot of people, and we don't have enough time to go into everything. There's a lot of people God used to get to me. Yeah. And the real linchpin of it, though, was Search, at least as I look back. And I always like to say, I don't know that it necessarily matters that much when or how you believe, just that you believe now is the most important thing. But God really did use Search in a big way, because I had a lot of questions and I was open, but I wasn't super serious about anything, and I wasn't really looking for stuff. And what happened to me was I had this crazy career. I mean, I was 18 years old. The first tour first of all, my first single, How Do You Get That Lonely, did really, really well. Yeah. And so that opened up this whole world that I didn't even know was going to happen. And so my first tour I was on, I opened for Rascal Flatts and Blake Shelton.
Wow.
And we played arenas and sheds, amphitheaters, all for half a year or so together, and that kind of level. So you just it was from 0 to 100 super fast.
Real quick.
And then I got married young. Remember the brain?
Yeah.
Not
smart.
Not working that well. And so we moved to Nashville. We got all this swirling up, and it was a recipe for marriage not to go well.
Yeah.
And so back to Search, we moved to Nashville, and we've been married 6 months, and I think we're about to get divorced.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, this was the dumbest thing we've ever done.
Yeah.
And so I had, thankfully, a couple managers who are great guys and followers of Jesus, and were back then, and they cared about me, which is rare. And these guys are still good friends of mine, by the way. And it's pretty rare. Artists usually hate their managers. I know that because a lot of artists have told. Well, I probably shouldn't say that, but it's not common that people love their managers and their agents and stuff. So, but I always did. I had the same people the whole time because of that. They're great guys, and so they cared about me beyond just as a client, and so they knew I needed some marriage stuff. They knew that really the real solution to that was figuring out really this God stuff. You need to kind of get that figured out. And so they probably did the most important thing that anybody's ever done for me, which is they invited me into a Search group. So there was somebody on our staff in Nashville that they were friends with, and his name was Bill Howard. And they said, Bill, would you start a group at our office? And they invited me to come. And it was a little different than what you and I do now, because this is a long time ago with Search, but it was just a straight up Bible study. I think we did maybe 1 Corinthians. I had never really read the Bible before that. I remember asking Bill one of the first times that I was in this group, what's the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I was coming. I mean, I really just, everything was new. And it was, I wish I could go back in some ways because it's so fun. The first time you learn some of the stuff that's in the Bible, you just go, this is in the Bible. It's so crazy. Yeah. And anyway, so I remember just blowing my mind. And there was one day where I asked him if he could stay late. And I said, I got some questions for you. And here was my question. I said, I understand that Jesus is the center of your faith. And I understand that he died. And that's really important. But I don't know why. Yeah. So, of course, that's a layup for us, right? Yeah. And so he was able to share the gospel with me. Yeah. And I don't think it's the first time I ever heard it. Like I told you, I had gone to some churches by that point. Had started to kind of explore a little, but that particular moment is when I remember going, that makes sense. Yeah. And there was something in me that said, that's true. What that guy's saying is true. Wow. And it was really just an amazing thing, man, because the whole trajectory of my life has gone different because of Jesus. Yeah. Hey, everybody, I wanted to take a moment and let you know that the Reach podcast is brought to you by Search, a ministry dedicated to sharing Jesus through friendships and conversations for nearly 50 years. Learn more or get involved at searchnational.org. And how long had you been meeting in that group when that conversation took place? Was it short or months, year? No, it was very short, maybe 6 weeks. Okay. Yeah, real quick. And do you remember with those, I'm curious, just as we're talking about reach and connecting with people, with those two guys that invited you, obviously you mentioned a uniqueness that they seemed to love you. Do you remember anything about like your first like reaction when they invited you? Was there any hesitation and a turmoil of, but if these guys want me to go, was there pushback? Like how, do you remember registering any of that? No, I wasn't thinking about it. I really just remember going, that's cool. They asked me, and I remember thinking that they cared. Yeah. And I remember thinking, I need something because whatever I'm doing is not working. And one guy in particular, Mike, one of my managers, just had a great family. I mean, and he had a great wife. He got wonderful kids and stable. Yeah. Yeah. And I just remember going, I like that. If this guy, if whatever he's doing, I probably ought to listen to something. And if he thinks I should do this, then I'll do it.
Yeah, it just always makes me think about the power of an invitation and how much we can say no for someone, and sometimes just feeling like someone wants you there.
Well,
it's powerful.
It's really powerful. Yeah. And the other thing I would say about that's interesting is we work together. So one of the things that people are often scared about is my coworkers, and maybe there's places, this wasn't a corporate environment. I know there's other dynamics, but maybe there's less risk there too than we maybe impose on certain situations. And the other thing I tell you about Mike, and I think he would tell you this about him, is he'd probably go, I'm not really an evangelist.
Sure.
Like, I'm not great at this. This isn't my thing. And yet what he did has really had a huge impact on my life. And I don't even know that he necessarily knows. I mean, I've told him, we talked a little bit, but you just never know. Even a simple invitation, what the effect, this is 20 years ago now. And here I am doing this, and definitely wouldn't be without him. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, and a lot of other people too.
So let's talk through that, because obviously you're here, not in Nashville, not doing music anymore. How did you go from that to here? Kind of how did your music career end and get you here?
So, yeah, that's a long story. I stayed so from 15 to 26 was when I was in the music business. And I did a lot of different cool things. I told you, I toured with most of the people that were working back then. There's a few exceptions, but over a 10-year period of time, I probably did a show or did a tour with, if you could think of, if you listened to country music back then, I probably worked with them. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of that. I got to play the Grand Ole Opry just more times than I can count. Dozens of times. Was there all the time. That was a huge thrill. Traveled all over. I played everything from football stadiums with Kenny Chesney to the worst dive bar bad gigs that you've ever played.
Can I just interject? Quick question. Coolest performance moment of your career, and why?
So, well, I just mentioned playing with Kenny. That was always a thrill. We got to do a number of shows over the years, and I got to open some stadium shows for him, and one of them was in Seattle, which is my hometown. Cool. Actually, I'll tell you two. We can always edit some of this if this is not interesting to people. I'll tell you two with Kenny. One's good and one's rough. Okay. But the best show, my favorite show that I ever played was with him, and we played in the Seahawks Stadium. I don't even know what it's called now, but it's the new one. It's where they play now. It's a big stadium. And so at the time, when we did it, it was the highest grossing show in the history of Seattle. So basically the biggest show that was ever in Seattle. And I know that record stood for at least a number of years. Yeah. And so what was fun for me being hometown, usually the opener, there's like 5 people in the audience and nobody's paying attention. They're actually hard gigs when you're the opener for that reason. For sure. It's daylight, which is not good.
People are getting to their seats, all that stuff,
all that kind of stuff. But for me, that show, I walked out to do my little 20-minute set, and the stadium was packed. Wow. And it was just one of the coolest things. I mean, people just going crazy. And then the Seahawks gave me a jersey. So for the last song, I run backstage. I throw the jersey, and it's got my name on the back, and I run out. Everybody's going nuts. So I remember that being pretty fun. Yeah. The negative one, the very first arena that I ever played was with Kenny, and that was at the Tacoma Dome in Tacoma, Washington, which is actually where I was born. And so that's an indoor deal, and I was probably like 19 years old or something like that. Yeah. But anyway, people always wondered, like, do you get sick? Have you ever been sick? So I got like the flu. Oh, whoa. The day of. I mean, fever, sweating, and throwing up bad. Wow. And so I remember, 5 minutes before I walked on stage, I'm throwing up in the bathroom at the Tacoma Dome. And then
you just go out?
Go out. And I did my 20 minutes, not the way you want to do your first arena show. Yeah. And then I got back off stage and basically collapsed, and I was out for days. I mean, legit, not stage fright. I mean, I've never really had that. I had like flu. I
Wow.
was sick for days, and that was brutal.
Man.
Yeah.
Jeez. All right. So transition.
What did you, sorry. Did we answer all the questions? So what?
I think so.
No. How did I get to Search? That's what you
Yeah,
asked.
a little bit of the transition as you're.
Yeah.
Like, how did that come to pass?
So, yeah, where I was getting at was I got to do a lot of great things, but the highs were really high,
Yeah.
and the lows can be really low.
Yeah.
And I never had so much success that it was just a guarantee you're going to be able to go have a career, or I never had songs that were so big that even if I never had another one, I could work the rest of my life, kind of thing. And so it was just this yo-yo deal. Always enough to keep doing it, never enough to be real stable or feel like I had a career. And I had a lot of things along the way that just didn't work out. So it was 10 years of, and I mean, it's hard. It's not an easy way to make a living.
Yeah.
And so I just had so many things where it didn't work out. And in the music business, a lot of stuff's just really out of your control. And so after like 10 or 11 years, and again, I'd been following Christ for like 6 or 7 of those, I just got to the point where I had a sense that, if God wanted this to work out for me, then it would have worked out by now. All of these times, and we don't have time to go through these, but I have my whole career is basically everything's lined up, everything should work, and then it doesn't work. Then the next thing, you get to the very end, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what?
It's like something's pointing you in a different direction. Yeah.
Yeah, what in the world? And then the only other thing, so at some point I just had this sense of like, after 10 years, maybe I get the hint. But I'd never thought about doing something other than music, because I didn't go to college. I didn't have a plan
It's all
B.
you'd ever known.
And it's all I'd ever known. I thought that maybe I would go into the business side of the music business because I found that interesting. Actually, I always thought those were the really smart people.
Yeah.
Because when artists don't work out, you can just trade them and get a new one, and you still have a job. When you're the artist, it's like, what am I going to do? So, but the only other thing I kind of considered doing, I was a songwriter at the same time, so I wrote songs for other people, and I had written a song called "I Got to Get to You" for George Strait that did really well on the charts. Actually, one of his last hits that he had on the radio, and so I kind of thought about continuing to be a songwriter, but same deal, man. I just didn't have the passion. I couldn't see myself doing that for another 30 years or however long. And so I ended up, this is getting to your deal. I just had this sense that something was going to change. And so I remember Bill Howard and we went to lunch, this taco place on Music Row. And I shared with him just some of what I just told you. And, you got any advice? I'm just looking for advice. What's next? Wasn't really in a hurry. And he goes, well, Search is looking for some younger people, and I think you'd be good at this. And I didn't really tell you this, but I'd been doing it. So I got real involved locally.
Started leading groups.
Was leading some groups here and there, and had been sharing my faith really from day one.
Yeah.
Crazy cool stories with a bunch of that stuff. So I had went to seminary the first time during the early part of my music business. I actually did a program at Western Seminary in Oregon. I did it remote from Nashville and got I didn't get credit, but I got a certificate thing that took me a year or something. So anyway, but the point is, it wasn't out of the blue that he'd asked me about ministry. It was out of the blue that I wasn't thinking about it probably.
Yeah.
So I just remember going, seriously? Because I always thought his job was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I just remember feeling more excited about the opportunity to do this than any other thing I could have done. And so I guess I've always been a little bit of an adventurer and a little not super scared of risk. And especially if, I think God's really in control of stuff and he's our provider and he takes care of us. And so I kind of like living that way. Yeah. You know what I mean? So there's part of me that just goes, this would be a new challenge, something different, and it would also be an opportunity to do something really meaningful. Yeah. So I said yes, but it took like a year. It was like a year process to get out. And so I left and not knowing what it would turn into.
Yeah. Well, I know since then God has used you in a lot of ways in Search, and now with this Reach podcast and so many other ways. To kind of close, I'd love just to hear from you. We could spend multiple podcasts talking more about different parts of your story and your time with Search, but what do you love about Search? What draws you to it? What are you excited about? And why do you love, it's clear you love this when you're doing it weekly. What draws you to it? What do you love about it?
Yeah, I love what we get to do because I think back to the guy that I was and really how I was reached, how God got the gospel message to me, and it was through a couple friends. And I remember what it was like to not know the Lord, and I remember what it's like since then. And for me, that's been a real benefit. I mean, just going, I know what it's like to not live with him.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Search is able to reach people who may not go to church or who may not even care about God or have any questions, they might not even thinking about this stuff. Yeah. We're trying to go reach the hardest to reach people, and to do that in a way that's relational, that is kind, that's intellectually robust, not just giving people pat answers, but actually going, you know what, that is a good question. Yeah. We should have a good answer for that. Let's talk about it and let's explore it. And all of those kind of things, the way that we get to do it, I just think is so unique. It's so needed. And as I look into the future, to me, man, I think there's more and more of this that's needed, because the way things are going, relationships, I think, are going to be key to winning people to Christ. So I'm very, very excited. Search has grown so much since I've gotten to be a part of it. It's been 13 years that I've been with Search. And I started in Nashville, by the way. So we're here in Fort Worth, but I started on the field staff, really doing like the job that you're doing now. I did that in Nashville for about 7 years with Dave Wilson. Shout out to Dave, my man.
He's not listening.
No, he's not. But yeah, we've gotten to see God's hand on the ministry, and then developing Reach the last few years has been very fun. So that's big awesome. Privilege. I was thinking the other day that if I were to develop the perfect job for me, it would be what I'm doing.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Wow. Well, I love that what you love about Search so clearly goes back to your two friends inviting you, that you saw them, you didn't know what they had, you knew they had something, and you knew they loved you, and you knew that most people didn't love the people they worked with in that way. And that opened up the door for you to step into that, and would certainly attest that God has uniquely wired you for what you're doing, man. We're grateful for you. Grateful for you letting me be here today to kind of open the door a little bit to the story of Blaine, and really appreciate this. And thank you guys for chiming in, and
thank you, Josh.
Grateful for you, man.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Reach podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You're not going to want to do that. Share it with a friend, leave us a review, and that really helps others to find us. And for more resources, visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you.